Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this panel on cannabis cultivation in Europe, mastering the challenge of market saturation, oversupply, and underperformance. On today's panel, we have David Engel. He's CEO and President of Full Moon Real Estate Investments and Ondara. Then we have Adrian Fischer. He's co-founder and managing director at Demikan. He's the third founder, next to the other two founders that you've seen on stage before. We have the honor to have here Vera Broda. She's the CEO of MHI Cultivo Medicinal SA, as well as Alexander Rieck, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Harper Farm GmbH, but also one of the pioneers here in the German cannabis industry and former CEO of GK Pharma. It's a quite interesting topic here with the cannabis cultivation. We've heard some controversy already. There have been some ongoing discussions already in the audience. So maybe let's start with Adrian at that point again and see, Adrian, as a German producer of medicinal cannabis, what do you think, what strategies do you employ to ensure a consistent supply and quality to navigate a competitive European market with your own cultivation, but also with the imports that you are doing, and also maybe in a perspective on other countries that you as a company from Germany want to get active in?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. You're absolutely right. I think the response is twofold. Like, the first one would be a little bit more technical on the side of the cultivation. I think what's really important if you're producing just for the medical market is consistency and control, and we've established a facility to do just that. I would definitely suggest everyone who's going into that direction to invest into 2 labs, the first would be a tissue culture lab, the second one would be your own QC lab. And if you have full control over the product, then consistency comes. So for our domestic production, that's our strategy. We can't produce any out of specification batches because there's no second use in Germany. So everything that is out of specification has to be destroyed. And there's also no way to reroute it, for example, for exports. But the second part, I think, is really important. What we're also doing is we're offering GMP services. So we are importing GACP flowers from every producer that is fulfills GACP criteria, where we do the audit, can import the flowers, and we do GMP processing. So I think that's a really important part, also to include other people into the German market and offer flexibility to include other peoples over the world to produce in or sell in Germany.
Thank you very much. David, how do you perceive the European ecosystem, production ecosystem, and the complex regulatory landscape that we have here in Europe?
Well, it is okay. Yeah, it is a challenge. As I've heard many times, the European markets are not harmonized. The way they handle, every aspect of the GMP aspect, even the cultivation, the agencies are all learning a new business. They're a little confused by it. So, we're governed by agencies that really don't understand cannabis. Like in Spain, they're learning cannabis. They're learning with us. So it makes it very challenging. There's no right answer always. You can't just pick up the phone and call a consultant and get an answer. So it's a complex regulatory situation as everyone learns how to navigate this cannabis, this herbal medicine. As far as the cultivation goes, you made a good point, Adrian. You have to control every aspect of your operation, from the tissue culture, genetics, which are highly preferred to prevent problems in your crop, but also it's very important that your systems in your cultivation facility are designed properly. That's where a lot of folks go wrong in the States and in Canada in the past. We've done about everything you can screw up. We screwed it up in the United States. Okay, so we're hopefully done screwing things up. But every aspect of temperature, humidity control, drying methodologies, every aspect has to be precisely on, or you're going to have a bad product, or you're going to have a product that fails or out of spec or what have you. So that's my 2 cents on that one anyway. Okay.
Thank you. Vera, you're one of the pioneers in Portugal Can you tell us what were factors that contributed to the successful establishment of a cannabis cultivation operation in Portugal, and how can Portugal leverage its advantage that it has? And maybe you can give us a quick overview on where the Portuguese market stands at this point in terms of cultivation.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. So Portugal has been very accommodating to the medical cannabis industry in the sense that it opened up its doors for investment. On the other hand, the regulatory framework is very conservative, and one must understand that when one invests in cultivation in medical cannabis in Portugal, it is a long path. It's the pharma path in a very conservative European structure. And many companies, when they enter the cultivation, they are not entirely understanding of the pharma path, and that has created many difficult situations for the medical cannabis industry alike all over Europe. And that's a bit the situation in Portugal. Many licenses, many license submissions, many companies that were set up and haven't made it through because you really need to take a deep breath and walk through every little path. The first mover advantage is definitely critical for success.
Thank you. Alex, what is your perception? I mean, you're active in Germany and you have an grow operation in North Macedonia. What do you think, where are cultivation markets going, and what are some key considerations when setting up a production facility still?
The most important thing is that you have a very good team. We have in North Macedonia an amazing head grower and a very well-educated team, and they are taking control of the cultivation 24 hours, 7 days a week. You always have to control all the lights, nutrition, water, etc. So you cannot sleep. You have to control the environment, etc. The whole time. And the problem is to cultivate a product in the same amount with the same THC content, so that you hit the specifications. You always have to produce within the specifications, otherwise you cannot sell the product. For example, in Germany, when it's registered as a 21 THC flower, then you cannot sell it as a 25% THC flower. That's not possible. And when it comes to new market, so I'm in the industry since 2017, and what I was always surprised that the cultivators, they have big dreams and big ideas, and they said, oh, we are now building the state-of-the-art facility, etc. So it's good to do the homework, but you should also know the market where you want to sell your products. So in the end, a lot of producers came to me in the past and said, hey, Alexander, now we have the grow and 4 tons and we are now looking for customers, can you help us? Said, no, now it's too late. You should have come earlier. In best case, or I want to give an example for the Polish market. The registration of the product will take you 12, 16 months or more even, yeah. And it's very conservative. Everybody's looking to Poland right now because it's a very interesting market. There's no insurance paying the cost for the patients. That's why I'm always surprised that I hear that it's a very big market, but if you know some people there, they will tell you. And I think what is really important when you enter a new market, you should also know the regulations side by yourself and have very good contacts who are also very good informed what they are doing. Yeah.
So we heard this topic of consistency before and stable genetics. David, you work with genetics. What is your stance on how do you see the role of genetics in overcoming market saturation to a certain extent and underperformance challenges in the European cannabis industry? What role do genetics play in this equation?
Yeah, I see genetics as vitally important to being competitive in the marketplace. We saw the phenomenon in Canada where certain genetics would become popular, and then everybody's got their hands on those genetics and started growing them, and then the prices, just plummet. So we bought a genetics bank, and we have a genetics company where we pheno-hunt about 950 high THC genetics. We also have some one-to-ones and CBD genetics. But we think that where we can stand out in the market is we can provide importers of cannabis, flowers, and other products. We can provide them the exclusive genetic from our genetics bank that they can choose, and only they would have access to those particular genetics that we license to them permanently. So I think that's where you can stand out in the market as a distributor, to have access to the best genetics. We're totally introducing new genetics, over time, every year. Keep a really fresh variation of genetics, and we also prefer to start with tissue culture clones from our cultivation.
Adrian, you're also doing tissue culture and you're also focused on genetics. What do you think is the role of genetics, and also in scaling cultivation operations or making genetics available potentially for home cultivation and those kind of topics? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, we're thinking very much alike here. This is also one of the focuses we're having. So as a little background, in Germany we're quite limited with which strains we can grow currently under our government contract, but we are not limited for which strains we can do R&D. So we've began that already when we started our company, pheno-hunted our first strains, and now are running a lot more pheno-hunts using our TC lab and preparing a strain database for Germany, especially when there's a rec market with the potential of cannabis social clubs coming online, but also for home cultivators. And I think there's a great demand for not only good and stable genetics, but also clean genetics. We know that many kinds of different diseases are very prevalent, especially in the US market. But since we are now also having lots of US genetics here in Europe, all that has come over. So it's a really important thing to have something ready in that direction. And that's also something that we definitely would like to offer.
Vera, we already have here a couple of overlaps in what you guys are all doing. What would you say are some of the lessons learned from you in Portugal about collaboration and competitiveness in Europe itself?
Collaboration is critical because this is a starting industry, especially in Europe. We have a lot of experience coming from North America, from Israel, but in Europe, it's a whole different ballgame. The pharma regulation is completely different than it is in North America or Israel, and the market in itself has a lot of potential, but we're far from reaching the potential. So if we all work together and manage to find the path to help educate the market, educate the doctors, help with the regulatory path, ensure that the governments understand the pharmacoeconomics and the sustainability that medical cannabis can bring to them in terms of less expenditure with hospital beds, with drugs that can be harmful and create worse expenses to the government, establishing the dividing amongst us the cultivation and the entry, as we ourselves, Medica in Portugal, are also cultivators in an EU-GMP manufacturing facility. We also have strategic partnerships in terms of genetics. So together we can unite rather than be competitors. We need to collaborate and let each other outstand in their expertise to make this a more successful established industry and avoid the pitfalls and the mistakes done in North America and Israel.
Yeah, thank you. It's very important. I agree. Alex, what do you say? What role does collaboration play, and how can everyone address these issues of oversaturation and ensure that there's a more effective distribution of products in the market?
So, the authorities in Germany are very different, and to get products into the market is often a challenge for foreign producers. And in the end, to make an example, Bavaria, you can import medical cannabis flowers as an API. If you irradiate them, then you need an approval by the German bee farm. Then it must be cultivated under GMP conditions, and the development lasts 6 or 7 years. It's a very good development. We have now the knowledge with all the audits and all the GMP, GACP, GDP guidelines, which, there was a way from the old pharmaceutical market into the medical cannabis market, so the development, I would say, is very good. Of course, you still have, you still have to take some challenges in Germany, because, for example, I know an example from North Rhine-Westphalia. They have to produce under GMP conditions in the end, and maybe another company has to do it under GACP conditions to produce a product. So sometimes it's not easy for producers to launch products here. And yes, we have an oversupply in the German market right now. In 2017, I thought, hey, when everybody built their facility, we have so much supply worldwide. Who can smoke all the flowers and take the extracts? But in the end, okay, we have an oversupply, and I would say every company has to focus on themselves. There will be something on stock you cannot sell in the industry or in the market. That's the truth. But in the end, that it will come to this point, it was clear in the past, and now you have to stay, or you have to survive and to offer a very high quality product. It's a patient-driven market for the flowers, and in the end, I would say focus on yourself, on your goals, and also think about new formulations. I mean, now we have flowers, extracts. A lot of companies are thinking about more, and new dosage forms, etc., are the key for the future.
Yeah, it's a great keyword that you're saying that. That would have been my follow-up question. How do you see the role of pharmaceutical practices and standards in shaping the future of the whole European cannabis industry?
I mean, very important. You always have to control everything, from the GMP cultivation, GACP cultivation, GDP, and in the end, the monography and all the NRFs out there. Now we have a new one for cannabidiol. You have to know everything, And of course, the one thing has an effect or an impact on the other thing. Often the pharmaceutical entrepreneur says, okay, my responsibility ends at the door of the pharmacy, but that's true. But in the end, you should also know the challenges for the pharmacies, because they are giving it to the patients. And if you produce something and in the end it's not compliant with the NF or something like that, then you have a good product, but you cannot give it to the patients.
That's another interesting aspect. Adrian, I mean, you're a physician also. We're talking here about cultivation. Everybody can cultivate in the end. We need some prescribers who are putting everything on a prescription so the patient can have access. Can you tell us a little bit maybe about what kind of legwork is necessary for advancing medical knowledge and improving patient access? Because I think that's something that people are underestimating a lot.
Yeah, I mean, of course, education is one of the most important things, as long as it's still a purely medical market. There might be some changes coming up. You're probably aware of the draft legislation that is coming out that might be that the status of cannabis as a narcotic changes and it becomes an RX. That would at least help prescription in a lot of ways that it makes it much easier for many doctors to prescribe it. Because I think what people underestimate when I talk to my former colleagues, for example, from my studies, many of them have never given out a narcotic drug prescription. It's something that is relatively unusual to do, and so it's really something new. So what we're, for example, doing is we're inviting doctors over to our facility and providing like a first-hand impression on how medical cannabis is cultivated, and so that they also can see the product, smell the plants, and so far the feedback has been really, really positive. Even if you invite people that you don't invite because they are already in the cannabis field, but you invite them because they are at the farthest way possible away from it, the feedback was always very positive, that when they learn and understand what cannabis can do, that they are supportive of it afterwards.
David, maybe back to you. What are other risks and opportunities that you see associated with investing in cannabis cultivation ventures, especially considering that we have these fragmented market dynamics and regulatory hurdles in Europe?
Well, I woke up this morning and received an article on my phone from Forbes magazine, and it said that canopy growth has destroyed 19 billion US of value over the last 5 or 6 years. They've got about 400 million left that said they're going to be insolvent. So one of the risks of importers of cannabis flowers from Canada and elsewhere is the supply chain risk of the underlying companies they're bringing in from. There's very much pain in Canada right now. All companies are losing, bunches of money, not all attributable to Europe, of course, but there's a supply chain risk when bringing in from suppliers that aren't reliable longer term. So what I would do is hitch my wagon to someone that's going to be there a while and not losing money. The Canadians right now are able to sell product below cost because they have an unlimited public money supply for right now, but that'll soon change. So I think sticking together, partnering with suppliers that are there for the long run, I think is key to being a successful distribution company in the long term. And then as far as the capital markets right now, the sentiment for cannabis capital is as low as I've ever seen it, because the sentiment in the U.S., the sentiment in Canada, the sentiment really never got too euphoric in Europe, but the sentiment's as low as I've seen it. I was telling somebody, last time I asked somebody for equity in a cannabis company, they punched me in the face. Okay, it's not a popular thing right now, so it makes it very challenging for companies out there to expand their operation, build their grows, do things right. So what happens in the cannabis business in the States and elsewhere, companies tend to cut corners on the design of their facilities because they don't have access to capital. They do things wrong. They don't set it up right. Very important that you design facilities to control the cultivation process precisely. We spared no expense in Spain as we built out we acquired a greenhouse, which is 1.6 million square feet, state of the art, but on the conversion of cannabis, on a small portion of that, we spared no expense to make sure we had control of every aspect of the cultivation process. And that cost a lot of money, but I knew that if we didn't do it, we'd be in trouble, like many of those before us that have had trouble with cultivation. I see it in Portugal, not you, but some companies have ceased operations because they had trouble with cultivation. It's about 1,000 things that can go wrong. And if you don't have the proper facilities to produce that cannabis reliably, you're going to run into a lot of problems.
Thank you. Vera, you're a marketer and you studied business administration and business management in Boston and in Switzerland. What do you think? What strategies should be employed to establish and expand the presence in global cannabis markets? And do you approach building corporate partnerships, or how are you dealing with this topic?
Well, I think that David touched a bit on it. I think it's a time in the industry where consolidation needs to occur. There's lots of companies struggling because they did cut corners and did not manage to create the infrastructures that are required to grow cannabis. You said before, Lisa, that growing cannabis, anybody can grow cannabis. It's true, anybody can grow cannabis, but not anybody can grow it properly. And that's the biggest struggle in this industry. If you don't cut corners, like David says, and if you do invest everything that it takes to grow a proper flower, then your chances to make it are very, very high. And the point is that there are so many companies struggling and so many that don't deserve to struggle because they are very good. That's where we need to keep our eyes open and find them and consolidate our efforts, because that's the path to this new era in cannabis, in medical cannabis. To pave the way. Another thing is to stay ahead of the game and make sure to be innovative. We have an R&D division in Israel that is working on new pathologies, on new formulations for pathologies, and that's the future for this industry. Because as cultivation is going, it's becoming increasingly more difficult. The investment is very heavy, and the price of the cannabis flower is going down tremendously to the point of a commodity, where the pharma regulation does not allow it to be a commodity-priced product. So that's where we need to focus on consolidation, to focus on where we can make a difference, and to make sure that the governments and the regulatory regimes that keep us working will help us sustain this industry. And another thing is the sustainability. It was spoken before, how sustainability is critical in the future. There's this common misconception that only indoor cultivation is correct and makes consistency and allows for high quality flowers. Well, you have to consider that countries like Portugal or Spain or sun-driven countries where we can expand on greenhouse and enjoy the benefits of what nature provides us while lowering our footprint are definitely the path forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's have a warm round of applause before we open the floor questions. Are there any questions in the audience?
So I'm Bert van Duin from the Netherlands. So what I actually see, when you have a mature plant-based industry, then usually you have separate professional breeding companies, small number. Then you have a lot of producers cultivating the crop, and then you have a limited number of processing industry making maybe half products, and then you have companies that make the final products like a food or a medicine. So what I see is in the cannabis industry, this is not happening. It's out of balance. I think that's a major problem. So how can we change that and just invest in a few very professional breeding companies, have good producers, cultivators, and have a good professional processing industry for medicines, pharmaceutical companies. So I think now what I see is that companies tend to do everything from breeding up to making the products, and maybe they're all very specialized businesses that need to be in different companies.
What's the answer first, Adrian?
Yeah, I think you're right. The regulatory framework is just very difficult in the current situation. So if you think about a nursery concept, it's currently pretty complicated to export plants from one facility to another in another country. But we're seeing that that's happening in most of the states in the US. So I think it's definitely moving in that direction, but the framework is just very complicated to make it possible. And even then, for the pharmaceutical production, that's just begun, right? We're all learning how to do it right, to do something, and do audits from other companies, work together. I'm pretty convinced that it's going in that way. Meanwhile, I think it's good to get an understanding of all the steps, a little bit also like you said. When there is no fully established industry, I think it's good for you to know a bit of all the processes in the supply chain. But yeah, I agree with you. It will be in the future. How long it takes to get there, that's very difficult to say, and I think depends on changes in regulatory frameworks.
Somebody wants to add anything?
And even if you separate during the supply chain, you have somebody who's doing the extraction, etc., the logistic companies, everybody's working together. I know that or they are not separated from each other. And in the end, yes, we have a lot of companies who are taking parts of this supply chain to get the product from the cultivation in the end to the pharmacies in Germany. I don't know if there are many companies in the market right now, that's true. But is it more complicated if you do it company or everybody's doing, let's say, the extraction, the next is responsible for the logistic part, or you do it in-house like Harper does? In the end, it's always very complex, and that not everybody will survive in the future. That's also a part of the truth.
Hi, thank you so much. Jaradi Karsar. I was wondering if you can speak to hemp cultivation in terms of industrial applications. My understanding is at this point we have Mercedes, Audi, as well as BMW having adopted biocarbon stemming from hemp. So what do you see the role of all of that here in Germany? Thank you.
Anybody wants to? I think most of the panelists here have their focus more on the medical part, so the industrial hemp part is not really represented in this panel, I reckon. Yeah, but if you want, I can connect you to the expert in our industry association in Germany for that topic, and then you can discuss it with him.
Let me ask you then on the medical side, because there's been a lot of discussion of THC derived from hemp or different terpenes derived from hemp. And hemp and cannabis are really the same thing.
Yeah, but that's
except
a tricky
for the
thing.
THC level.
That's something. That's a very tricky thing. We need to talk more about standard of identity of individual products and on the complete value chain that they are produced in. And here we are looking at medical value chains. It's something completely different than the hemp value chains that are mostly laid out for producing fiber and seeds. Yeah, but if you really look at these things like cannabinoids and cannabis resin, it's still in the bad schedule of the global drug policy. So we all have to do something in that regard to first free that, so the therapeutic potential can be used and the industrial potential for cosmetics, for foods, and other fast-moving consumer goods like smokables, inhalables, and so on and so forth. But that's an entire different panel, I guess.
Actually, that was exactly my question too. I was going to delve into the food and the nutrient aspects of cannabis, because the discussion is market saturation. And just anecdotally, like at Canna, Portugal last year, I had a bunch of old farmers coming to me and saying, hey, how do I rip up all my apple trees and replace it all with hemp? How do I rip up all my banana trees and replace it with hemp? And I said, you know, hemp for what? And the answer was universally flour. And it's like, well, you know, we've already seen that in North America. Like everyone dove in to do flour, but I mean, there's still plenty of medical or at least health-related the aspects that the constituents of this plant can provide, such as the oil, such as the seeds. I mean, I'm vegan and a lot of my protein comes from hemp seeds.
It's a great vegan ingredient, but that is something that we need to discuss more. But alone in the medical sector, we can already see that there's a lot of oversupply. We've seen the same thing in CBD, actually. Like there was a spike, it was a hype, Yeah, I will talk about that in my presentation in a little bit. After that hype, like we had a couple of hundred companies that have been consolidated. The prices of the entire market have dropped. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, you could get over 20,000 euro for a kilo of CBD isolate that costs you now 600 euros. So all this market is messed up as well. But again, this is all negatively affected by the drug status, and that's something we need to work on so we can really use the economic potential, use it as a foodstuff, and so on and so forth. And in Europe here, we have the additional challenge of novel food, where, for example, cannabinoids need to be registered so they are safe and can be handed out on a safe scale to end consumers.
Well, that was great. Very comprehensive. Let's hear it for the panel. Do you have anything? We have like 2 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to say?
Are there any more questions? I don't know.
Is there one more question?
With regard to medical
You've
cannabis.
taught them everything. Let's hear it again for the panel. One more time.
All right.